Hi, my name is Robert Schiefer, and today I'd like to tell you about my AIL experience so far through National University and the Harupa Unified School District's Master's Program. I feel that the three most impactful aspects of my learning so far include the aspects of connectivism, student motivation, and a student's ownership of his or her learning. First, let me tell you about connectivism. In my mind, connectivism is a teaching practice that attempts to bridge content area to content area through multiple methods of interaction. In connectivism, who is the learner? In a lesson that utilizes connectivism, the learner should be engaged with the content by collaborating, sharing, and building knowledge with a peer in the classroom. The lesson is learner-focused in that the ideas and connections that the learner makes will inform how the instructor or teacher teaches the lesson. In connectivism, who is the teacher? In one of these lessons, the teacher acts as a facilitator, presenting enough information and knowledge so that learners can engage with the content and knowledge and form new ideas and opinions about the content. The teacher has a general plan that will guide learners into a desired direction with a definite end goal. However, the ways they reach that end goal could vary. Arts and humanities in relationship to connectivism. The arts and humanities attempt to explain the human condition by connecting shared experiences. When we experience great art, we get a glimpse into a window of understanding with profound situations. The arts and humanities attempt to share what makes a meaningful life through abstract situations. The audience witnesses a story, or a painting, or drama, and makes connections into his or her own life. Inquiry-based learning. Posing an essential question at the start of a unit or lesson can give students an example of how intellectual curiosity can function. This can relate to connectivism in that it opens one question into a possibility of several questions in response to the original question. For instance, a lesson that opens with a question about science can eventually tie back to math or even history. Project-based learning. Connectivism can take project-based learning into new territory since social networking can open students up to a variety of sources. What could have just been a group project with students in class can turn into a project with partners around the globe. The advances of the web and technology in general have opened up new adjacent possibilities. Designing learning spaces. The connectivist classroom is student-centered and is a place where individuals help to shape activities through minimal structure provided by organizers. Here could be an example of a connectivist lesson. A lesson that I taught last year about the greeting and closing of a friendly letter could be made so much more by applying connectivist principles. For example, instead of students writing to an imaginary friend or pen pal, I could connect students with second graders in a different part of the country or world. Students could wait the traditional amount of time to send an old-fashioned letter, or instead could share their letters through Google Docs and read their letters to each other via Skype or FaceTime. Now I'd like to tell you about motivation. There are two types of motivation I'd like to go into today. The first is extrinsic motivation. The second is intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation deals with material rewards and the praise of people other than oneself, like parents or teachers. Offering the students who meet a specific behavior or task reward, like a classroom points from Class Dojo, candy, or even adult praise can have immediate and positive results, but rarely last in long term, especially when students adjust their expectations appropriately. I have experienced this firsthand, especially in my first year of teaching. When desiring students to make quicker transitions, I liberally complimented possibly one or two students who would make the transitions right when I asked them. After complimenting these students, the students who had been moving with no sense of urgency all of a sudden began quickly transitioning their materials to set up the materials for the next lesson. However, after a few weeks of this, students began to revert back to their lack of urgency when transitioning, and I had to think of alternative possible motivators. Now, this might have been because one often needs to escalate the rewards or punishments for student behavior. Alternatively, students can also be motivated by intrinsic motivation, or understanding the importance of a studied topic by feeling a sense of accomplishment. Since the first day of school this year, I've been constantly asking my students to think about why this is important, in the hopes of developing their own sense of intrinsic motivation. Another opportunity to activate intrinsic motivation can be when discussing a standard's essential question. An instructor can highlight why a specific skill or standard is important. This might make students realize that school is really what one makes out of it. I really spent a lot of time at the first week of school this year talking about the importance of subjects and styles and why we do things this year. Students worked with partners to establish what they thought was important about each school subject and why it was important to do one's best. Finally, my AIL experience thus far led me to do some research investigating the impact of rubrics on a student's ownership of his or her learning. My research has shown that the implementation of rubrics, especially rubrics that are created with student input, help clarify a teacher's expectations for a given assignment. In addition, rubrics can be a useful tool in that they help students understand their current ability level so that they can set small goals for achievement. By setting small, manageable goals and realistic goals, students take steps to achieve the next level of a given rubric. Thus, students take an active role in their learning, rather than a passive one where students are constantly waiting for teacher approval. Furthermore, students who can verbalize the success criteria of a given rubric can effectively communicate these success criteria to peers, and they can truly illustrate the command of student proficiency. They achieve this by verbally articulating the expectations of a rubric, and they can tell their peers why their work is proficient or why it might need improvement. Next, I'd like to show you a video from the Core Collaborative illustrating how someone can take ownership of their learning. This is an example of a first grader in New York City. I will provide the link on my video, on my post. Thank you for watching. These are my resources.